West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
We have two readings this morning. The first is taken from Becoming, Michelle Obama's book. Since childhood, I believed it was important to speak out against bullies, while also not stooping to their level. And to be clear, we were now up against a bully, a man who, among other things, demeaned minorities and expressed contempt for prisoners of war, challenging the dignity of our country with practically his every utterance. I wanted Americans to understand that words matter, that the hateful language they heard coming from their TVs did not reflect the true spirit of our country, and that we could vote against it. It was dignity I wanted to make an appeal for, the idea that as a nation we might hold on to the core thing that has sustained my family going back generations. Dignity had always gotten us through. It was a choice, and not always the easy one, but the people I respected most in life made it again and again, every single day. Our second reading is from Bruce Reyes Chow, who is a Presbyterian teacher, elder, and denominational leader in California, who writes and blogs on progressive religion, human rights, particularly refugee and immigrants' rights. In 2018, along with 30 other faith leaders, he was arrested at the US-Mexico border as part of a protest by the American Friends Service Committee against the militarization of the border and the inhumane treatment of the refugees. His books include But I Don't See You as Asian, curating conversations about race and in defense of kindness, Why It Matters, how it changes our lives, and how it can save the world, from which our second reading is taken. Kindness is not just the absence of being mean or hateful. Being kind entails actively resisting actions, ideas, and institutions that rob others of dignity. Kindness and the commitment to see the other as deserving of human dignity demands of us to protest, resist, and do all that we can to fight that which says otherwise. Not only do we have the power to make sure that things do not get worse, but over the long haul, we also have the power to make long-lasting change for good. I need you. We need one another. We can only do this together. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk in its light.
The subject is dignity, dear to our hearts, but not often spoken about, per se. Spoken about a lot in my workplace, which is long-term care. Spoken a lot in places where people are being served and helped. But I want to dig in a little bit. I avoided the pun of digging into dignity, but I just did it. But I want to dig into the meaning of it, and if we could leave here just each one of us seeing a little differently with that as our lens, and that will be a very good morning for us together. So I want to look at the meaning of it, the definition of dignity. We all have ones, but I want to dig into it, what it means, and what it means to whom, and does it mean the same to everybody, and who is the everybody? And then, for another D, the domain of dignity. Where is it applied? How is it applied? Where do we run into it, and where should we run into it? And then lastly, and this is a big, chewy, hard bit, is discrepancies. Discrepancies in our world to do with dignity, and that's where we'll invite each other to see a little differently. So the meaning of dignity, we say the word, we would all say we're in favor of it, but the meaning of it is controversial on our planet, and controversial even in some workplaces. Is dignity something we see in people or in ideas? Or do we see it there? Is it inside the person? Or is it how we see someone? Is dignity inherent? The word inherent means it inheres, it sticks in someone. It's there when you're born. Or, and some religions could say, it's given to you at birth, say by the deity or by nature or by evolution. And then some would say it's granted if you are sophisticated enough, you have dignity. If you dress a certain way, you have dignity. The word is used in many, many ways. And so the idea of seeing it differently, I had two aunts. I had more than that, but I'm choosing two of them to tell you about, and I won't use their names. I will call them Aunt A and Aunt B. Oh, what does older people, what does Aunt B remind you of? Andy Griffith, Aunt B, his Aunt B. I didn't think of that before. So don't do that. Aunt A and Aunt C. My one aunt was well-read, wealthy, beautifully dressed all the time, acted with decorum. The house was perfect. And as a child, we tiptoed into it. And courteous, yes. I would say some cold courtesy. And a wealth of the books just everywhere. Very, very, very dignified person. And my parents would say she's very dignified. And so my very earliest use of the word dignified is, okay, better behave. I have another aunt, Aunt C, and she is my aunt by marriage. She's all over the place. She's as messy as can be. She's jovial, she's fun, she says things that she shouldn't say once in a while because she's so forthright, and she's a come on in, make all the mess you want. And Aunt C, I just felt fabulous with, and until the day she died, she was a welcoming person. Now, nobody would probably have called her dignified, but did she have dignity? And was dignity only in the sophisticated look? Maybe I didn't see much of it at all there, but she had dignity too, and dignity. So the idea is often paired with a look, or a way of dressing, or a way of speaking. There's a story that, and then I'm just taking a little piece out of the story, and someone is saying, there it is on the floor. And the other person says, I don't see anything on the floor. And the first person says, it's right beside the laundry basket. And the second person says, I still don't see anything on the floor. And the person says, it's my last shred of dignity, it's very small. And if you've ever felt that, where whatever, if you're a patient in a hospital and they've ripped off your clothes and they've written on your chest what they're going to do and this sort of thing, or, your bowels are acting up, or you feel like you have, your last shred of dignity is gone. But did it go somewhere? Did you actually lose your dignity? Or were you in a situation where your dignity needed a little enhancing to feel better? So the idea of where is it, what is it inherent, or could we call it inviolable? Where does that come from? Who says we have to honor dignity? Who says we have to see it where? And so the world gets complicated. I want to dig in I think I put in the blurb that we'll do a very brief history, and it's just going to be in a few sentences. Then we'll do a little bit of geography to see where this word is entrenched in our documents and on our wall in our workplaces. And then we'll look at the discrepancy to say, well, if it's on the wall and it's in our documents, surely it's happening everywhere. And that's the discrepancy part. So a little bit of history. The very first use of the word dignity, which comes from the Latin word dignitas, which means worth. Worth. Worth, you probably could look in your home and see worth, but there would be different levels of worth. You say, well, if I had to let go of that thing, I could let go of that. But this one, don't touch it. That is very important to me. So levels of worth. And early in the history, in early Roman history, and early Greek history, it was the idea of worth that could be measured. So your dignitas would be someone who held a high position in the government. They had dignitas. They were worth a great deal, maybe worth a great deal of money. So the original idea was a leveling, a ranking. There's something more dignified than the other. And it took a long time to change because it seemed to fit with the people that had the dignity and weren't being listened to if you didn't have it. And then it also grew, around Charles Dickens' time, it grew into that you could earn it. It was a merit or idea, that if you were a very, very good person, if you really were very skilled, if you were knowledgeable, or you did great deeds, then that you were now elevated to the level of dignity. But people that didn't do that had no dignity. So again, it was a leveling thing, and it was earned. Now you come to the 1948 French abolishing of slavery. One of the first times the word was used that slavery is an assault upon human dignity. And the word got in there that the way someone is treating someone could be an assault on their dignity. Anyone. Very different. You see, just switched, and they look in every. How did that happen? I was reading. Got a whole book. It's called Dignity, and they traced very long. How did it change? And there's no answer to that. It just seems to be that we widen our idea, and we get to see dignity as very different. So, from rank to merit to everyone is part of our human history. So a little geography. I want to take you through just the names of the countries, and we're not going to visit them. I just want to name them as having these words in their document. Of course, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we all know off by heart. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of, unfortunately, brotherhood. Humanhood will change to humanhood. So did the United Nations declared this? They declared it. So this is what it is. And every country in the world signed on to the document. True? No, not every country signed on to the document. There were countries that said, I don't believe that. That's not what I want in my law. No. So we don't sign on to it. But a whole bunch of countries did. And fortunately, we were one of them. And many, many, many others. I will focus in the geography of dignity. If you look at the world of health and medicine, it's a neat way of tracing where the countries have said it matters how we treat people. The World Medical Association issued a declaration to say that those who practice in medical research or medical practice are to protect the life, health, dignity, integrity, the right to self-determination, and privacy of all their patients. Anyone in the medical profession in this room here would nod to that. You signed on to that. That's part of the declaration. Convinced of the need to respect the human being, both as an individual and as a member of the human race, we recognize the importance of ensuring the dignity of the human being. I'm really glad about that. I'm glad when I go into a hospital that the people have dedicated themselves to preserving my dignity, not just fixing my problem. Not just fixing my problem, but preserving my dignity. In Canada, the government of Canada, the principles of respect for human life and dignity must be held to. Denmark, they condemned the reproductive cloning. They condemned reproductive cloning because it would violate human dignity. In France, respect for human dignity must guide the development of knowledge and the limitations of rules in research. In Portugal, the cloning of human clothing is a good idea for dignity. The cloning of human beings, because of the problems it raises concerning the dignity of the human person, is ethically unacceptable and must be prohibited. In Sweden, the act expressly forbids anything that will diminish the integrity of the individual or human dignity. United States, and I do apologize for anyone online from the States, the document that I was reading under United States said, in the United States, there's no universal agreement on the meaning of the term human dignity, so it doesn't show up in so many of their documents, but it is there. Canada did it, the European Union did it, Germany, the promotion of fraternity among individuals protects their dignity. Iran, South Africa, Switzerland, All these countries, if you looked at their documents, dignity shows up. Whereas in ancient history, not at all. Not at all. It was either social rank or by merit, but not everybody. And so all these are there for them. Now, if you took certain topics, when you look at the domain of dignity, where do we apply these things? I thought the first thing, of course, I thought was gender. Dignity for gender, that all genders would be seen to have equal dignity. And again, our question in the back of our head is, do we treat them all that way? But we take a stand. So Dorothy Sayers, if you know her, in reaction against the age-old slogan, woman is the weaker vessel, or still the more offensive, woman is a divine creature made for the glory of man, we have, I think, allowed ourselves to drift into asserting that a woman is just as good as a man, without pausing to think exactly what we mean by that. What I feel we ought to mean is something so obvious, that a woman is just as much an ordinary human being as a man, with the same individual preferences, and with just as much right to the tastes and preferences of a dignified individual. Good for Dorothy. But I'll go back in history a little more. Queen Elizabeth the First. Queen Elizabeth the First. I wish I could do it with an accent or something, but as for my own part, I care not for death, for all men are mortal, and though I be a woman, yet I have as good a courage answerable to my place as ever my father did. I am your anointed queen. I will never be by violence constrained to do anything. I thank God I am indeed endowed with such qualities that if I were turned out of the realm in my petticoat, I was able to live any place in Christendom with dignity. I love picturing that scene if it ever happened, but I don't think it did. Dignity for gender. Dignity for work. Booker T. Washington. No race can prosper till it learns that there's as much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. Martin Luther King. All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and worth and should be pursued with respect for excellence. And a man named Abhijit Naskar. Equality begins in the mind. If in our own mind we have a pedestal for the billionaire and for royalty, and no place for the janitor and the bartender, then even 1,000 policy reforms won't be able to equalize such a cockeyed, internally broken society. That work, dignity of work. So is it something that we're born with inside and we have to find it? And maybe. I don't know. I've read everything in all the directions, and I don't know what stand I would take on that. But I'm going to just lay it aside for a moment and say it's also the way we see. The way we see someone, the way we see something. And maybe dignity can't be taken away. I've often, in my work, unfortunately, when someone is left uncovered or there's a mess or something, the phrase often comes to mind, you've taken away his dignity. Well, did we take away his dignity so now he has none because of what we've done? Or is it that we have not treated him with dignity as we believe he deserves? Or right now we've gone to get the blanket, we'll come back really as fast as we can, but we're in the middle of something, so we are attending to his dignity, but it's taking a little time. Fair. But it better be quick. So the idea of, did we take it away? Could you lose it? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you had no dignity? It was probably because your dignity was not being respected or cared for at the moment, and you felt it. But I don't want to think in this exploration of something that can leave us and come back to us and leave us and come back to us. So it's the lens. So if we put a lens on where we see dignity as that's how we interpret something, and then we look out at everyone, well, I guess they all have it because my lens is giving it to me. My lens is doing that. So not looking for it, but looking with it. And I challenge myself on that. Healthcare brings it out strongly. Empathy, compassion, and caring have been taught, and they've been insisted on in professions. I'm going to step aside from my notes here for a moment and talk about dentists, because there's one right here. Dignity in dentistry. If you had a dentist who was professionally competent, then you're going to be treated with dignity. If you have a dentist that cares about you understanding what's going on and he explains it to you, he's treating you with dignity. If you have a dentist that will actually scold you a little bit if you're not taking care of yourself, he is treating you with dignity and respect. And if, when finished, he gives you a plan for what you might do, not that you ever want to come back to him at all, but if you're going to come back, you want to be treated with dignity. And it's not that your dentist looked at you and said, oh, I think that's a person with dignity. It's how the dentist was looking. It's the lens through which he looked. Saw a me, and I was important. I have a couple of PowerPoint slides there if you're with me on that. There's a woman named Laura Hillenbrand. Laura Hillenbrand. She was an athlete, an equestrian. She took part in horse jumping and horse riding and loved every bit of it. And then one day in her early 20s, I believe, she was stricken with a severe case of Epstein-Barr and fatigue syndrome, and was paralyzed from the waist down for some time and took a long, long time to recover. Never could ride again. But she is the author, if you read the book or saw the movie, Seabiscuit, the horse story of Seabiscuit. That's Lauren Hillenbrand. And she felt the lack of, the feeling of no dignity when she couldn't do what she was loving to do, or she couldn't move. And she wrote other stories, and this book she wrote, powerful, called Unbroken, a World War II story of survival, resilience, and redemption. That's the title of her book. And she explores prisoner of war camp experiences and the topic of dignity, the topic of respect in them. Hard read, but pointed and sharp and good. And this is what she said. Dignity is as essential to human life as water, food, and oxygen. The stubborn retention of dignity, even in the face of extreme physical hardship, can hold a person's soul in his body long past the point at which the body should have surrendered it. So holding on to dignity. In the prisoner of war camps, the guards sought to deprive the prisoners of something that had sustained them even as all else had been lost, and that was dignity. To be deprived of it is to be dehumanized, to be cleaved from and cast below others. In its absence, they tried to define men not by themselves, but by their captors and their circumstances in which they are forced to live. So if you define their state, and you've seen pictures, did you? Yeah, that's the next. I don't think I put in. Oh, sorry, back up one. There were pictures, and you've seen them, of deplorable situations of people in prisoner of war camps. And so the question I would ask is, did they lose their dignity? Did the guards take it away from them? Or did they have the same dignity as they saw themselves before and after and with, but they were not being treated with it? The lens that was being looked at them through, there was no dignity in those lenses, and so you could treat them any way they wanted. The next slide is a familiar face to many, Viktor Frankl. He wrote much, and he wrote from prisoner of war camp, and there's lots of stories that go along with that, but what he particularly, I think maybe the prisoner of war camp experience brought this home to him so vividly that the people that were rounded up and put in Auschwitz and different places were deemed to be useless in the way, not worth anything, because they weren't worth anything to the one in power. So the definition of dignity came from this person. These persons have it. These persons don't, so let's pack them away. And let's torture them, and let's kill them, because they have no use. And so Viktor Frankl wrote from his bones that it can't be based on usefulness. Can you think of a person in your life that you know right now that isn't as useful as they were before? Do we want to say they've lost their worth and lost their dignity? Not at all. It also really calls us to see more richly the dignity in humanity when the situations around them have dissipated for them. Viktor Frankl says, Today's society is characterized by achievement, and consequently it ignores people, achievement. And consequently it adores people who are successful and happy, and in particular it adores the young and it adores the skilled. It virtually ignores the value of all those who are otherwise, and in so doing, blurs the difference between being valuable in the sense of dignity and being valuable in the sense of usefulness. The next slide is a hard one to look at. They were deemed not useful, not important, not of any worth. Would we want to look at them and say they are a pack of undignified human beings? It would crunch us to do that. They have as much dignity as anyone else, perhaps in this situation even more. But they are not being treated like it, and it wears and wears and weighs on. So they could actually end up feeling they had none. But that's our fault, not their fault. Viktor Frankl. And I want to end up doing something I have no right to do at all. I feel it. I did it with myself. I thought, you have no right to do this, to say this, because it's not your words and it wasn't your issue. But I'm going to read it to you anyway. And it's a little long, so just sort of, shift in your seat, the way you think, because you can tell by his voice he's coming near the end, so that's good. And just comfort yourself into listening to this. An American social reformer, an abolitionist, an orator, a writer, a statesman, was a former slave, and his name was Frederick Douglass. If you've ever read anything by Frederick Douglass, be prepared to blow away. A fabulous writer. He escaped slavery in Maryland and ended up in the northern states. And he spoke against slavery. And they invited him to speak to the Rochester's Ladies Anti-Slavery Society to celebrate July 4th, Independence Day. So he was the speaker, an escaped slave was the speaker to celebrate July the 4th, which was America's independence from Britain. That's the ground we're going to do with this. And so as I read it, I want you to look for where he's heading. He's very clever. I'm sure they didn't know what was sneaking up on them in this speech. Very clever. He was celebrating July 4th, independence, the attainment of dignity. For whom? And this is his speech. Mr. President, and again I'm saying I have no right to do this. I am giving you his words. I wish you could just think he's saying these words. Mr. President, fellow citizens and friends, who could address this audience without a quailing sensation has stronger nerves than I do. I don't remember appearing as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly and with greater distrust of my ability to say what I must say today. I know that apologies of this sort are generally considered flat and unmeaningful, but I have to apologize. I'm not fit for this, but I must say it. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from there to here are by no means slight. That I'm here today, speaking to you, is no small matter, and as a matter of fact, I am astonished as well as grateful. For the purpose of this celebration is the 4th of July. It's the birthday of your national independence. It was the first place I picked up where he was going, because he didn't say our. He said your. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance and to the signs and the wonders associated with that act and that day. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. The eye of the reformer is met with angry flashes, portending disastrous times, but his heart may well beat lighter, the thought that America is young and it has a chance to grow and to improve. Little signs of hope there. May the reformer not hope too highly, to hope that wisdom and justice and truth will yet give direction to her destiny. Great streams are not easily turned from channels worn deep in the course of ages. Great streams. And so I will be asking in about a few minutes, I've asked Donna to bring us a song about that uses the metaphor of rivers. While a river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but a withered branch. As with rivers, so do nations flow. But where do they flow, and for whom? The simple story of it is this. 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. You were under the British crown. The home government, you know, although a considerable distance from your home, did exercise parental authority over you, imposed upon you as its colonial children restraints, burdens, and limitations, and in its matured judgment, it deemed this wise and right and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the fashionable idea of this day that governments are infallible, and the absolute character of acts presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far in their excitement as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. So he started to praise them for seeing the lack of dignity in their position. To say now that America was right and England was wrong is easy. Everyone can say it. Even England says it now. But feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the government, like your fathers, like men of honesty, earnestly petitioned and asked England for more respectful treatment. But the British government disagreed. It persisted. Even now it realizes it was wrong. But your fathers felt them so aggrieved that right there, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. Total separation of the colonies from the crown. It was a startling idea, much more so than we at this distance of time can regard it. The timid and the prudent people of the day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. Such people lived then that are shocked by change. They had lived before, and they will probably ever have a place on this planet. They hate all changes, except silver and gold, copper change. On this sort of change, they are always in strong favor. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and the alarm, the revolutionary idea moved on. And he goes through the history of it changing from a protest to a war. They were that serious about what they wanted to do. And he congratulates them for their courage and their bravery to break through from a power that was not treating them with respect, with dignity, as whole people. Then he says, fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I to do with your national independence? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that the answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. But such is not the case. I say it with a sense of sadness, of the disparity between us. I am not included in your glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between you and me. The blessings in which you today rejoice are not enjoyed by everybody. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, but I must mourn. To drag a man in chains into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in your celebration of independence is an inhumane mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? I can imagine the people that invited him saying, I wonder if he's going too far here. I wonder, we didn't really want to hear that. We wanted to hear congratulations for our anniversary and also congratulations for all the work that's being done with slavery. And he was not about to do that. And he went on to itemize the number of people who are still enslaved in the country that was celebrating their 4th of July. And he called it gross injustice and cruel. And he blamed the church, not only for not stopping it, but for actually benefiting from it. This is why I'm reading it, because it could have been, if I hadn't told you who was writing it, it could be read today. It could have been built today. It could have been structured today. He says, until it's everyone, it is still a social ranking. It is still by merit. It is still whether you're sophisticated and you wear fancy clothes and you're educated, or you're not at all and you're just you. And so he condemned them in this speech brilliantly by setting it up in contrast. He said, you spent your lives breaking away from a power that took away your dignity and your independence and the respect, and yet you can't see that the problem is right in your homeland. How many times, even in this service this morning, have we noted the discrepancy that other people in our country are living in? Because the lens is not being put there, there as clearly, as definitely. So is dignity something we can see differently to do? And I'm going to ask Donna to sing. It's something you're familiar with, but I've asked her to sing it as a contemplative, warm celebration.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.